Welcome to this episode of the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We are advancing what can be learned about Chakmah Choter. This is a most interesting study, and that the Choter is the most proclaimed end days individual. The whole world is looking forward. Well, certainly, I guess even the whole world. Muslims, Jews, Christians are all looking for the return of the Messiah. And big deal. But fortunately, I happen to know him personally. He happens to be the former and returning king of Israel, David. And that part is absolutely certain. But there's more to it than that. You see, the person who is the most discussed, the person who has the most said about him regarding his appearance in the last days, is a spokesperson for YAHOWAH, his voice at this time. And this individual is known as the Choter. Dode wrote voluminously about him, devoting the entire 14th Mashal proverb to the Choter. And Yahowah did the same. In his case, the complete essay in the 11th chapter of Yahowah, Isaiah 11, is devoted to the Choter. And yet this is a person that heretofore no one was looking for. And when you recognize there's not just a line about them, and there actually is no line about a returning Messiah. Messiah is going to return because he just happens to be the king of Israel, his Dode, the beloved son of God. But of this individual, there is 2 entire chapters, long chapters, devoted to him. And the things that are said about him are really extraordinary. And the most repeated thoughts on this individual, God presents him as the one who writes the sign that Yahweh is going to lift up for his people in the last days. And that he's going to be able to do this because he is remarkably Chakmah, intelligent. He has bien, understanding. He is itzah, this ability to be the first to see God's entire play, the whole portrait from beginning to end, in such a way that he can convey what has and will occur as never before. He is the one who knows the most, Diat, as Yada, who is now familiar with the message God is communicating to his people. He has the utmost and Yara respect for God's name and for his beloved son. And this man is particularly Gabor. He's bold. He's capable. He is absolutely and overwhelmingly the most empowered and capable man that God is going to deploy prior to the return of his beloved son, our Messiah and King, David. Competent, courageous, combative are all things that are conveyed by Gabor. What's unique about this man, according to Yahweh's testimony through the prophet Yahowah, Isaiah, is he's the only one in human history to be imbued with the 7 spirits of Yahweh, including the very spirit of Yahweh. And he is the only one whom Dode would devote this much information about, saying exactly of him what Yahweh would inspire Yahowah to convey 300 years thereafter. So with all this information, there should be quite the fuss. Speculation. Who is this man? Because he's not just someone who's going to appear casually on the scene at like when Elia returns, because he's going to be Eliah's partner. He's the other witness. But he's a man that is known to you now. He's the man who is speaking to you now. There's no one else in all of human history that qualifies based upon all that is said about this individual and those books that you see positioned on the shelves behind me. That's the sign. It is to Yada Yahowah. And that is why we're here. That's why back in this prior December, now just 5 months ago, that Yahweh said, I want you to start speaking to my people. You've written enough. It's time for you to convey what you have learned. Speaking directly to not just Yisrael and Yehudim, but to my wayward children, such that they listen and that they're prepared to return to me so that I can return to them. That is why we're here. That is the story of the Chakmah Choter. Choter is a individual who is a stem off the main branch. The main branch is off the tree of lives. He is a stem that is extended off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil so that God's people can make an intelligent decision before it is too late. He is also a sucker, the one that gives life to the fallen stump that is Yisrael, that brings productivity and fruitfulness to the rootstock that is Yehudim. And he is the rod of divine justice. This man is not just the Bashar, herald of Dod, the Nakri, observant foreigner of Yahowah. He is the final Zeroah, the one cultivating the harvest of Shabuah and Towrah. Shabuah harvest is less than a year from now, 22nd May 2026. The Towrah gleaning, the 23rd of September, also a Shabat in 2033. This man is also the Adam of Parah, the red heifer that lays down his life to prepare the adulterous woman so that she can be betrothed to our King when he returns. He is the man from Edom that saves many. It is a rather extraordinary list of accolades that are given to this individual, way more than, well, certainly way more than he anticipated and infinitely more than he requested, because he was quite happy being anonymous as Yada, but that was not Yahweh's intent. He wants him known because he wants his people to listen. You have very little time left. It's going to get very rough out there for you. And there's soon going to be a Fakistinian state of Islamic terror that's carved out of the heart of Israel. And it's going to make it very, very difficult to survive as a Jew anywhere in the world, because by capitulating to the Muslims, just as what happened when Neville Chamberlain capitulated to the Nazis before the beginning of World War II, their furor was raised, and it will be the same this time. They will smell blood in the water, and they're going to be, as they have always been, genocidal. The world's going to suffer, of course, but Jews more than any other. So that is where we are. We're going to continue our program, sharing with you as much as can be known about this individual, because he has a number of characteristics, just as did Dod, just as did Moshe before him, the other two of the three Zeroah, that appealed to Yahweh, that Yahweh thought, well, this is the guy that I can deploy to accomplish this mission. And you may disagree, you may think that someone else would have done a better job. You might think that no one as bold as I am would have the authority of Almighty God to awaken Yehudim. You may even want that person to be a Goyim, not to be a Goyim, but to be a Yehud, a Yisraelite. But the very fact is, if I were a Yisraelite, I'd be disqualified from this mission, because God specifically said that his Nakri would be an observant foreigner. I speak to Yisrael. You are my primary concern, but I'm also calling Goyim home to Yahweh through the Torah, through the Mikra, through the Bereth, and back to Dod, the Son of God, our King, the Messiah. Yahweh is in the business of reconciling fractured families. And while he has taken a very long sabbatical, he is nonetheless ready to re-engage. So let's ponder the implications of yet another treasonous episode in the lives of the Zeroah, this one, the first of the three. This one transpires at the beginning of the Exodus. It's as if Israel learned nothing from the insult of the golden calf and stayed in character. What I'm going to share with you is one of the most remarkable stories that I have ever considered. It's something no one heretofore has even discussed. And it is by understanding this story that we come to understand who the Choter is. More importantly, who you are in this story. And why this man was needed at this time. In this case, we're going to continue to focus our attention on the first of the three Zeroah, the man who Yahweh chose to liberate the children of Israel, to bring his people home and to convey his Torah guidance. Although he was placed on his heels and wobbling after the previous debacle, he wouldn't be allowed to catch his breath. As we know through the Torah, Yahweh worked through Moshe to articulate the message that he would later enable through the second Zeroah. The first explained the Mikra, these invitations to be called out and meet with God, and the second fulfilled the first three in 33 CE, delivering the promises made long ago pursuant to the Berith covenant. Then to reacquaint Yisrael and Yehudim with what he had said through Moshe and delivered through Dowd, Yahweh chose and equipped the final Zeroah, Yada, to share this life-saving message with you. These three men and their insider rebellions that they all faced as a result of fractured families, while pursuing Yahweh's purpose, they're all worth considering, especially at this time, when the fate of Yisrael, the ultimate fractured family, and indeed the fate of the earth, both hang in the balance. Well, we stumble from time to time when it is all considered, inspired by God, and serving at his pleasure. The three men, Moshe, Dowd, and Yada, are most often exemplary in their conviction, their character, and their courage. For most of their lives, their steadfast devotion to learning and conveying Yahweh's testimony to his people accurately, passionately, and without compromise serves God's purpose. In this regard, all three spoke for Yahweh without verbal collaborators. And when others tried to misappropriate the role that Yahweh had assigned to these men, there were severe consequences. Now, as we progress, there is an interesting passage in Bamidbar 12 that not only vividly depicts Moshe's personal relationship with God, but also presents a scheme deployed by insiders to override his testimony. It is the very same tactic that was deployed against God's Choter as his voice today. Interestingly, this revealing episode sits in the epicenter of the two chapters in Numbers that have become so essential to knowing the Nachri's role in Yahweh's plans, explaining how, where, when, and why the Bashar, this corporal body of the herald, will be sacrificed to save the surviving remnant of Yisrael. In preparation for Yahweh's return with the Messiah Dowd, in Numbers 5, we find the adulterous woman is cleaned by the red heifer of Bamidbar 19. So in context, and noting the antagonistic and defiant, totally unappreciative and contrarian, overtly malcontent and ornery, pathetically petulant and cantankerous, ever irascible children of Yisrael. What they were doing and what they did was to antagonize Yahweh, as well as his chosen man, Moshe. And so, to frame the issue and appreciate the story that we will consider again of Miriam's delusional and desperate quest for notoriety, we move from one sentence to the next and begin the 12th chapter of Bamidbar Numbers. There we discover that the anguished and disgruntled Israelites set off from Choreb for a 3-day walk to Towrah, which is called kindling and burning animosity. The Torah reads, "And it came to be that the people habitually and continually were akin to miserable and immoral, distressing and undesirable, worthless, anxiety-ridden companions. They were raw. They were loud-mouthed and disagreeable, evil and corrupt countrymen who were complaining and grumbling without reason, Ammon, who were self-defining as a sorrowful and sorry lot, lamenting without justification in the ear of Yahweh. And so when Yahweh heard this, he grieved, as his resentment and anger were aroused over a prolonged period. Towrah off Hugh. He was displeased, as his nostrils flared, his temper was inflamed, and his righteous indignation was kindled. Then the fire of Yahweh burned among them, and it consumed that which was in the outskirts of the camp. Bamidbar, in the wilderness, Numbers 11:1. Did you ever think you'd read such a thing? Did you ever think you'd hear such a thing? Oh, so many Jews claim to be Torah observant. Christians carry the Torah around, not knowing it's the Torah, in their Bibles. Muslims even claim that their God Allah inspired it, although that's the greatest bit of malarkey ever malarked. It's astonishing what I just read to you. I'm going to read it again because it is flat out astonishing that Jews became so cantankerous, so ornery, so miserable, such malcontents, that God lambasted them. You know, this notion that this Exodus was this lovely experience between the children of Israel and Hashem, G-D, the Lord, and that Moshe was a rabbi, and that they are all under control, and that he is the great liberator of the Jewish people, and that they all got along, and what a great experience it was. No. What we're going to find out is that God flat out gave up on Israel. Moshe said, I can't stand them. I want nothing to do with them. No one can lead these people. No one can get their attention. The job you've given me is impossible because they're impossible. And Yahweh said, yep, you called it. They are absolutely disgusting. Jews, this is God. This is Moshe. They're describing you. And let me tell you something. Nothing has changed. You're even more political and more religious now than before. You've even erased Yahweh's name. You've written him out of your lives. You replaced his testimony with the Babylonian Talmud. Replaced the covenant relationship with a stifling religion. You don't trust Yahweh anymore. You trust your IDF. So this is what it says. Let's consider it again, because this is as bad. I would have laid odds that what I just read to you is as bad ever gets, since this is God describing his people. But we're just beginning, because it's going to get much worse. And it came to be that the people habitually and continually were akin to miserable and immoral, distressing and undesirable, worthless, anxiety-ridden companions, loud-mouthed and disagreeable. They were corrupt countrymen who were complaining and grumbling without reason, self-defining as a sorry lot, lamenting without justification. In the year of Yahowah. And so when Yahweh heard this, he grieved, as his resentment and anger were aroused over a prolonged period of time. Israel, Jews, you have grieved God. He is displeased. You inflamed his righteous indignation. So then the fire of Yahweh, this burning rage among them, consumed that which was outside of the camp. God had to leave the center of the camp and express his righteous indignation all around them. Numbers 11:1. They were just 3 days' walk from Choreb, where Yahweh had spoken to them directly and had begun revealing his Torah, and yet they were already embittered malcontents in a horrible funk. And because this is the same contentious attitude that is pervasive today, history is repeating itself, making this narrative like the one in the next chapter regarding Miriam claiming that she could speak for God too, both prophetic and instructive. And so we're going to approach it from that perspective, focusing on what we can apply to our present situation. Now, keep in mind, this was not a unique occurrence, but instead the overriding disposition of the Israelis of the Exodus. Jews behaved badly. Therefore, so that I don't sound anti-Semitic when I disclose God's assessment, I'm glad that Yahweh stated it outright. And it came to be that the people were habitually miserable and immoral, undesirable and anxiety-ridden companions, loud-mouthed and disagreeable, always complaining and grumbling without justification. Sadly, this deplorable attitude towards God has devolved over the past 3,470 years. It has become so egregious that Jews have actually erased Yahweh's name. They have disgraced his beloved son, Dod. They have denied his covenant. They have misrepresented his invitations to meet, even replaced his Torah with their Talmud, and his priests with their rabbis. This must all change, and abruptly so, because we only have 8 years left before the family reunion, and God isn't going to tolerate any further defiance. I'm here to quell the rebellion. and to bring the parties back together. As bad as it has been for Israelites for having rejected Yahweh and marginalized Dod over the millennia, without many Yehudim coming to their senses, this next 8 years, well, they're going to be unfathomably horrendous. And I say this not only because we are fast approaching the time of Yaakov's troubles, just 12 months out from June in 2025, but also because rather than 70 million anti-Semitic Germans, there are now 2 billion Muslims, and the most devout of them are genocidal. And they are supported by at least 1 billion vocal and vicious, antagonistic progressives, socialists, communists, and conspirators who immorally serve as the pimps for these Muslims. The problem is now global. The Jews are outnumbered 500 to 1. The chosen people are isolated in a hostile environment and surrounded because Yahweh is not going to intervene. Not on their accounts, not now. Because there's still too many malcontents who are snubbing him, particularly the ultra-Orthodox, as well as the Marxists on the progressive end. As God has bluntly stated, it is shub for shub. Jews must return to Yahweh before God's going to return to them. We therefore have a lot to accomplish in a short period of time. We have to get you from the narrative of Numbers 11:1 to the narrative of family again, to the narrative of Yirmiyah 31, where the covenant relationship is reconciled. Aware that it would be this way and of no fault of his own, Yahweh has been driven to resent what his people have become. He is naturally disappointed. He's angry. Jews have continually grieved God, and they have done so for 35 centuries, constantly invoking his ire. And it was so bad early on, even during the first encampment after Towrah, that God's burning indignation set the surrounding countryside ablaze. You'd think that would get your attention, but nope. Jews have driven God away. So now our challenge is to change attitudes such that there is a receptiveness towards Yahweh and what he is offering and expecting in return. And until a reasonable number of interested and intellectually astute Israelis of exemplary character, as well as courage, because you have to fight the majority. And we join together as a resounding chorus. It's going to be slim pickings. Well, that's actually okay with Yahweh. Now, he's not looking for quantity, but quality. Now, I personally would like both, because I feel like if we get both, we're going to have done a better job for Yahweh, and quite frankly, a better job for ourselves and for you. I want both. Evidently, based upon this recording of events, Israelites believed that it was appropriate to irritate God. And when I speak to them in social media today, they still think it's appropriate to irritate God. I said, stop it. Stop it with the religiosity. Stop it with the political alliances. Stop it with calling God Hashem and G-D. Stop it. Gone on for too long. You can't continue to irritate God. But it's okay, evidently, for God to show that I wasn't okay from their point of view. They got all uptight when God showed that he was annoyed. Yep. They complained that God was annoyed by them annoying him. Sounds like a rabbinical argument for sure. So the people cried out in raucous tones. The extended family, relatives, and followers made a clamorous outcry toward Moshe. And Moshe, without assistance from anyone, sought to arbitrate by intervening. Palal, one of the more interesting words in the Hebrew language, he tried to provide some justification for intervening by foreseeing future contingencies. It was written in the Hitpael imperfect. With Yahweh. Then the fire subdued somewhat, dying down. Bamidbar in the wilderness, Numbers 11:2. The fire did not die down because Jews changed. It wasn't that they became less irascible. It was for only one reason. You know what that is? Why did the fire die down when the people cried out in a raucous tone toward Moshe? And that Moshe, without assistance from anyone, sought to arbitrate by intervening with Yahowah. Why did why did the fires begin to subside? You know? I do. Moshe was at the end of his rope. He was exasperated. He was about to crumble, and he would. And God knew there wasn't an alternative. Well, there was an alternative. That what Aaron's name means is the alternative, but that alternative was almost universally bad. Aaron was on the wrong side of almost everything. He was not only not a contributor, he was a liability. And that God surveyed the rest of the children of Israel, and there may have been two of them, that were decent. One was a fellow named Caleb, and the other was Yahusha ben Nun. But even they weren't, at this point, spectacular. So Yahweh realized that there's only one person that was qualified to do this job, because he had not only become intimately aware of the religiosity and the politics and the militarism and the caste economic system of Mitzrayim, Egypt, the crucibles of religious and political oppression, Mitzrayim. He had walked away from them. He had actually risked his life to save his people from the religion and politics, the economic system, the militant nature of Mitzrayim. He was the only person to recognize it was wrong, stand up against it, and then disassociate from it. Moshe was unique in this regard. There was no one else who had made that decision. Moshe was it. There wasn't a plan B. And so Yahweh said, all right, I'm angry at them. But at this point, I can't continue to overwhelm Moshe. He's already overwhelmed, and if Moshe senses that he's up against both the Israelites and me, this isn't going to work out. That's why Yahweh said, all right, I'm frustrated with him. I'm really, really angry with him. But at this moment, the bigger problem is Moshe. Well, the bigger problem was the children of Israel, but they were, well, they had overwhelmed Moshe. So I interact with lots and lots of Israelis on X, on Facebook, and on YouTube, who are receptive. And most, however, are raucous. The preponderance remains stained by Judaism and deceived by their political allegiances. And so, apart from the few, we continue to intervene between Yahowah and Yehudim, and the opportunity is largely unassisted. Although, with all of the energy God has invested prophetically and pragmatically into our collaboration, the fires are beginning to subside somewhat. And we're finding there are more and more people who are willing to help out. The hit pile stem that was used in the prior statement that says that Moshe was struggling alone in his attempted mediation, and that means there was no support for his effort to make amends and resolve the problem of Israel's deplorable attitude towards God. Therefore, with everyone either against him or uncommitted, Moshe was in a very precarious and vulnerable position, one that would have been emotionally and intellectually draining, especially for an 80-year-old man who didn't want to be there in the first place. Having tried to save his people once before, only to be threatened and denounced by them in response, he had a troubling history with the Hebrews and their lack of gratitude. Intervening for the moment, I understand the problem. Without a supportive team, success would have to be miraculous and not as a result of effort alone. The collective attitude of Jews in opposition to God and in support of Judaism is too pervasive. It's too entrenched to be resolved without the help of capable and loyal coworkers. And in this end, that is the answer. Yahowah will offer Moshe in this situation. It's one of many indications that this episode is prophetic and that it serves to prepare us to deal with what would come our way. Otherwise, there would be no purpose in sharing it, because it's exceedingly demeaning. No, you can't say it's demeaning to Jews because they brought this on themselves. You're not demeaning somebody who has demeaned themselves, have you? Are you? You're just reporting the facts. But it's so devastating to Jews to know that this is God's opinion of you. And it's so devastating to Moshe to have this aired, because he gave up. So we have to realize that God's not going to have this episode embarrass Moshe, whom he loved, or embarrass his people who he loved, unless there was a reason for it. And I'm here to tell you, we are the reason. You are the reason. You are the reason for this. You can be the beneficiaries of this, because it changes everything. It changes who you are and who I am, so that we can get together and return to Yahowah. The collective attitude of Jews in opposition to God and in support of Judaism has to be changed. And in the end, that's the answer. That is why we are here. That's why we're studying this particular narrative. This is also symbolic of and consistent with the way that I was attacked when I was shepherding God's people and had to deal with a cancerous and rebellious group of those that had formerly been close to me. And we're going to read how Yahowah responds, sometimes by providing a team of men, as he would in this case, so that we could perform as he intended. And while I did not expect abandonment nor vitriol from those I had perceived as family, for those I had nurtured along the way, I should not have been surprised, because the story of Israel is that of a continuously fractured family. It began with Adam and continued with Abraham, and it is no different with Ishmael or Yishak, nor Esau and Jacob. The 2 sisters, 4 mothers, and 12 brothers were contentious from the outset. Moshe's brother and sister turned on him, and Dod's sons were quite frankly obnoxious. Therefore, the moral of the story isn't precluding rebellions, overlooking them because they are embarrassing, or even trying to resolve them by placating those in betrayal, not even intoning down the message so that it is less divisive. Instead, we are to deal appropriately with each contentious situation. And these prophetic accounts from the Torah prepare us to do exactly that. Particularly Bamidbar 5, by cleansing the adulterous woman for her impending betrothal. And therefore Numbers 11, which conveys the lack of support for God's mission among his people and their cantankerous attitude and ingratitude, means that Numbers 12, with the rival voices claiming to speak for God while in rebellion, and Numbers 19, with the sacrifice of the red heifer being offered as the solution, even Bamidbar 20, which is the ultimate expression of ungodly behavior of Jews towards Yahweh, that all of these things help frame the issues associated with the fractured family that still troubles God and precludes the kind of relationship that he envisioned with his people. That's why we're here to resolve that. The name of the place was called that which is Towrah, kindled and burning in animosity, because the fire of Yahweh burned among them. Bamidbar, Numbers 11:3. As is the case today, Jews are an ungrateful lot who are firmly entrenched in their religious rebellion, and God is so distraught by them, he chose and equipped a goy to deal with them. Therefore, it is easy to see the present in the past, which is the purpose of our review. And that is by design. For here we are projected forward in time to our situation in the immediate proximity to the final Eshaf ingatherings, those being Shabuah and its Katsir, and Teruah and its Lakat. The Torah reads, the annoying riffraff that had been gathered on the threshold of the harvest, this grumbling rabble which had come together in considerable numbers prior to the ingathering, who were within their midst, were overcome with selfish cravings and eternalized yearnings, establishing parameters of their own choosing, having decided to act independently. Ta'awah. They were beset with desires and enthralled with cravings out of a space and delineating this purpose for themselves apart from the influence of another. This is the hitpael imperfect, and what that stem and conjugation do to the action of the verb. In addition, they turned away. They shub. They wailed, complaining and moaning, groaning in convulsions, lamenting. The Bnei Israel, the offspring of those who strive contentiously against God, said, what are we to consume, such that we are nourished by the flesh of the herald, of the human, who proclaims the words among the living, as a corporeal manifestation of the message. He is a Bashar. During a harvest of saved souls, the annoying riffraff must be cast out, such that those who are worthy can be gathered in. Therefore, the grumbling rabble must be culled prior to the ingatherings. Relatively few will be taken, while most will be left behind. And determining who goes and who stays, the factor will be the choices that each individual makes, whether selfish and self-serving or contributory to the covenant of our God. For example, on Shabuah 7s, the Katsir harvest will benefit around 1 in a million, perhaps 8,000 among 8 billion. This occurring on the Shabat of May 22nd, 2026. Most are going to be turned away, and they're going to be left to endure the wailing and moaning of the time of Israel's troubles. Continuing to affirm that this was both timely and prophetic. Bashar can be a verb, it can be a noun, or a title in Hebrew. Bashar is a really interesting word. And then recognizing that the vocabulary of God is defined by its actionable roots, the overriding intent of Bashar exists to depict a human herald, a man, conveying Yahweh's message to Yehudim. And while Bashar can speak of any animal, including humans, and is often rendered flesh, since the verbal connotation speaks of heralding good news and conveying an important message, we're typically wise to incorporate as much of this as is possible into any definition. Now, this has profound implications when seen in conjunction with impending ingatherings, particularly of Shabuah and Towrah, where there will be a clear distinction between those harvested and those left behind. It is the decision to consume or renounce what the Bashar herald is serving up that's going to determine who goes and who remains. As it would transpire, Yahweh was feeding the children of Israel, but not to their liking. Consider this as a metaphor, comparing the relationship God was offering versus the religion these miscreants craved, even if they ate it while restricted and abused in Israel, much like the onerous nature of eating kosher in Judaism. Longing for the bad old days, this is what the Torah says next. We remember that thing that grew, this daga, which we consumed in Mitzrayim when besieged and confined for nothing, gratuitously and undeservedly, without cause or compensation, gratis, with the mystery food. This is eth-ha kishu ahim, since the verbal root means to be hard and to be hard to prepare, and since it is only used this one time, no one actually knows what it might have been. And with the other unknown item, this is abat yak, again, a word that's only used this one time and doesn't have a verbal root. In addition to the green grass and hay, wa eth ha katsir, even with the edible that has to be peeled, wa eth ha batzel, and that which is exhaled, wa eth ha shum. This is from Bamidbar in the Wilderness, 11:5. I just have to laugh at this. It's a crying shame, but I guess that's humor sometimes is just the best approach. Anyway, yummity yum yum. That's quite a list, especially when we recognize that the primary meaning of daga is to grow, not fish, and that the other items on this list, at least apart from hay, which animals can consume, but humans cannot digest, were presented this one time and can only be explained through their verbal roots. This may be to say that the disgruntled Israelites were making stuff up while longing to be religious, things which quite often and commonly go hand in hand. It would certainly explain their current propensity to exchange the ways of Yahowah's approach for their own. Well, this next statement seems to validate my assessment. But now our soul has withered and is paralyzed. Nothing exists anywhere besides the negative association of whatever this man might be by our own perceptions. Numbers 11:6. When it came to nurturing the body, man, which is typically called mana, but was just written as a single syllable in the text as man, was good. It didn't just satisfy these irascible nephesh souls. These children had developed, unfortunately, just a bad attitude, and it was now bleeding through the fine print of the Torah. And this is because the people's perceptions were more important than what was beneficial in sight of God. After registering the complaint, Yahowah explained the nature of the free cuisine. He said, so the man, wahaman, meaning what, who, or why, was similar to the seeds of that which is fortuitous and pleasing for them. Its appearance was like the sight of something set apart, very different and uniquely distinctive. Numbers 11:7. So we want to compare this just to get a little better feel for everything that is being discussed. We can turn to Shemot, Exodus 16:31, where we read, and the house of Israel called the name of it man, and it was white like coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Sounds delicious. And here in Bamidbar Numbers, the Torah explains the people roamed about, gathering and gleaning it, and they ground it with millstones to crush it with their mortar. Then they boiled it in pots, making cakes out of it. So the taste of it was like the taste of a moist cake with olive oil. Still sounds lovely. Numbers 11:8. Now, even today, Israelites are roaming about while keeping their distance from God. And in this regard, Lakot is relevant because it describes the last chance to head in the right direction. Yom Teruah, the day of the herald, is a Lakot, a gleaning, the final ingathering of Jews. With an eye to the prophetic implications of Numbers 11, Rakayim is also telling, because the Temple Mount was originally a threshing floor with millstones. And this is where the herald will conduct his final ingathering of Israel, right on the Temple Mount. The mention of Bashal boiling plays into this narrative as well, because the result of adding heat to water that is described by that concept, it's going to occur when Yahowah ignites the fire above this torrent of water that he's going to unleash from beneath the Temple Mount, following the sacrifice of the red heifer on Yom Teruah. Perhaps even these unleavened cakes would be reminiscent of matzah, where the religious rebellion and associated guilt of God's people is expunged. The one fulfilling this moed, this restoring witness, was Dod, who was anointed in shemen, olive oil, per Yahowah's instructions, and the Bashar is his herald. the one who speaks for the king, tying all of these things together. And everything that God says, there appears to be a foreshadowing of what is to come. I'll share one more line with you, and we'll end this program because we have another family hour this evening, and we don't want to go right up to it. We want to get the eyes and the voice a bit of a break, but so that you're ready for it at 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, also the same time this time of year, and the middle of the Caribbean Sea, which is where we're live streaming this program. 6 o'clock this evening as the sun is nearing its sunset here on our island. We're going to begin our family hour, a celebration of the Torah. Our program will return to the topic of the prior few shows, which is the Katsir harvest that is upcoming on Shabuah. So we hope you join us for that. So one last teaser as we conclude this program on the Chakmah Choter. If you want to just get down to the essence of it, the smart sucker. With the falling of the dew upon the camp at night, the man fell upon it. Bob Midbar in the Wilderness, 11:9. Now, this too is germane to the last days, because it was falling out of the heavens above. It made this evident that Yahweh was providing it, just as he will re-engage in our time in collaboration with his two witnesses as we approach Shabuah, and then the time of the two witnesses where God's going to have so many marvelous signs, including the scrolling of this Nesh banner, which will be both this program as well as excerpts from Yada Yah, all while we, Elia and I, try to do our best to call this final remnant of Yisrael home. And God's even going to deploy the 4 chariots that he addresses in Zechariah to bring this final remnant of his family back from the 4 corners of the earth. It is going to be a marvelous time, the greatest show on earth, a grand spectacle of the relationship as we near the return of our God and his beloved Son. And speaking for them, this is the Choter, Yada, also known as Craig Winn. And this has been another episode of the YAHOWAH blog. Thank you for listening.